We'll continue to discuss pros and cons. We had last left off, actually I'd given us all homework assignments. Hopefully you did your homework and developed a few things. I had asked the committee to continue to come up with pros and cons for the list that I provided. And then once we are complete with that list, which I'd like to have that be done today, then the Board of Trustees have asked us to develop a list of questions that we would ask of, well, I guess in this case, specifically the city of Alpena as it relates to their contract, but I in my email to you, I made it more generic than that and said to anyone that would be interested in contracting their services to us. So with that in mind, I don't feel like we completed the operate our own fire department, at least very conclusively. Does anybody else have any, to recap those pros and cons? And I apologize for not getting this back out to you. I was out of town for the last few days. And so my scribbling on my notes, the pros are that we would continue to meet the mission of the township, operational control, economic development would be improved with a paid and paid on call, value added to the residents, not bound to contractual agreements other than obviously our own. I don't know why I'll lease out the bay to ALS. So I guess the thinking there was that if somebody wanted to park an ALS ambulance in our bays, and we could lease out the square footage of that area. The cons would be to not currently operating within the 1.5 mil, which we've spent a fair amount of time on. We recognize conclusively that 1.5 mils is just simply inadequate. As a consequence of that, we'd have an increased cost of doing business. I made a note, personnel issues, neither good nor bad. So we would just simply have personnel. Taxpayers may vote to not take a millage. Hopefully that would not be the case. Physical limitations to our structures. So I don't know, that's where we ended. And so I'd like to continue on that tack. And we don't need to go into great detail on the pros and cons, but just simple statements would be nice. So does anybody have any other pros or cons?
I think another pro would be of having our own. We have a quicker response because we have people on staff. I think that would be a pro. And I just noted added value to other townships because we do have a staff in the event of mutual aid or something to that effect. And we're able to respond since we have somebody on staff.
I'll echo that. My word was going to be dedicated. By staying with the township, you have dedicated crew on the station. That meaning it's going to respond to township emergencies, not in the Long Rapids, Maple Ridge, Presque Isle. So.
Okay. Anything else?
We have 100% control.
Yeah, that was
that
one of the top ones. Okay. So
I was going to add in there that for what you're with the resources you have dedicated to the township it comes at a lower cost for when you're comparing apples to apples, for having actual dedicated, committed personnel, dedicated committed equipment inside the township. You're getting that at a lot cheaper rate than you probably could looking anywhere else for the exact same apples to apples comparison.
I'm a little confused on that one. So help me understand that a little bit.
For what you're paying for a fire department now, you're not gonna be able to pay someone at any other level to cover the exact same amount of time, resources put into it. You're not gonna, any outside entity would have to pay, you'd have to pay them more for the exact same, meaning if you have somebody, if you have one person at each station dedicated, you're gonna end up paying them more per hour, more for benefits, things like that, than you're paying now. So when you, instead of doing an apples to orange comparison, if you do an actual same to same comparison, you're gonna end up paying more for the exact same coverage. Pro for keeping our own.
All right, anything else on that? Because I would like to, our goal is to complete this task so that I can put together a more formalized list. And then before I do that, I will send it off to everybody just to have them review it and make sure that it's accurate and that I've stated it properly, and then go from there. Any other issues, any other pros, any other cons?
Other than the ones that I added and sent out last night on my list.
Yeah, and I have not seen my email yet. I don't get my township email on my phone, so I you want to go over those or no?
You said, well, I just tweaked the way that you had mentioned about the potential for revenue. If a POC model was deployed, the potential for revenue from ALS, other ALS departments, the rent, the facility, the maintenance, like all of those journal entries that we have in our budget should then be transferred to that other entity. Remember the ones, the $109,000?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Those journal entry adjustments.
Correct.
Okay.
All of that would then be transferred to the other entity.
Well, that would be under the assumption that we didn't operate, because the journal entries are always going to be adjusted per department.
Right, that's why I said if a POC model, if a paid on call model happened.
Oh, you mean like a nonprofit or something like that?
No, I mean just a straight volunteer paid on call department.
Oh.
Yes. So see, there's a lot of subsections under
Yeah,
this
okay.
particular one, depending on what model we choose to deploy.
Correct. And so that possibly could fall under that hybrid.
Kind of what I was thinking.
All right. I might stick that one under the hybrid.
Okay,
Just for right now, only because this would be if we, but I see what you're saying. If we operated only a volunteer paid on calls fire department.
because that would still be, that would still be our department. then.
Yeah. And so yeah, you're right. That does sort of break into like an extra subsection within operating our own. Let me put that as a subsection.
It's already in that Word document that I sent you, so you can, whenever you do get to your
Okay.
email, you can play with it however you want.
Okay.
Yeah, because those journal entries was just for one station. It wasn't even both stations. Because remember, we have those line items that were for the other station. So it would just go up from there if we were talking both stations.
Yeah. All right. So then for the benefit of those that don't have that email that may be listening to us, were there others?
Response.
Increase in what?
Increase in scene response.
Oh, I have the increase in scene response, the additional personnel in addition to the city ALS crew. So referring back to prior to January 1st, that we would have 3, if not 4 assured personnel that would show up to a scene. Because we had our BLS crew and then the ALS crew equaled 4 bodies.
So under the heading of quicker response time, I can just put down 3 or 4 personnel.
Well, a quicker is not, yeah, I mean, it's both of them. It's a quicker and it's additional personnel.
Okay.
The other thing that I wanted to tweak too is in the cons, when we talk about not within the budgeted means or not within the millage, as Chad had pointed out, and I got the notes here about the fact is it's not, we do expect some out of the general fund. What we're lacking is a clear direction from the board of what those caps would be. And that even falls under the fact of whether it's our own department or whether it is contracted or there's a hybrid. If we, as the taxpayers, say, yes, I understand that there's a certain amount that will come out of the general fund, but we don't have a cap. Like if it's going to be, like right now, it was what, 233 or 300,000?
I think we took 200,000. out of the
Yeah.
budget.
That was transferred over. So is that acceptable? Is that an appropriate amount? I'm hearing pushback from others that that's not acceptable. Is it 30,000? Is it 50,000?
Well, I think like we've talked all along, if we take a look at this segmentedly, and if we take a look at the way the BSNA system operates, that it would be best case scenario that we have a department that operates within its millage.
Mhm.
And so if it can't operate from within its millage, then either the millage is too low or we have to figure out what other areas of the township lose services in order to supplement another department.
Okay. But
So
that's one of the cons is what I see. Well, this is
Absolutely.
going to be added work and added think processing to try and figure that out if we are unable to.
yeah, I mean, for sure,
Okay.
the answer lies in adequate funding, clearly. And so if when the millage comes due, or prior to, I'm not exactly sure what process you take during, this runs through it, 28, the millage.
8 more years.
So
The
I think,
operating is.
yeah, so I think,
It was a 10-year.
so I think through 28. So I don't know what the process is to adjust the current millage. But in my way of thinking, that's a given. That you can't sacrifice roads or other services when we know what the answer is. You know, we know the answer is a different millage. We just know it is. And so, but yeah, there's no doubt that one of the processes until such time as that is adjusted is that monies have to come out of different departments. And so we know that all other departments operate within their budget. And so, in fact, there's actually a surplus at the end of that. And so how do we equalize that? And so we know that fire departments are going to operate at a higher cost than virtually any other department. And so it was just bad guessing on the part of the township and fire department when we sought the millage. But again, I wasn't part of that, so I don't know the sort of the dynamics of the whole process, but we fell short of expectations, I guess is the easiest way to put that.
I would kind of, I want to say respectfully disagree that it was bad guessing. It was, when we asked for that millage, it was based on two things, and that was the data that we had and were operating off of at the time to do fire and EMS both. And we were also operating under the, I know what everybody says about assumptions, but if I actually, I wish I had it in front of me right now, but as far as historical budget data, I have a sheet on the S drive that goes back to 2005. And if I could put that in front of you right now, it would show where the township consistently year after year after year after year had been putting 200,000 to 300,000 into the fire department on top of whatever millage we had, because that is simply the way it operated. You know, roll in 2018, all of a sudden we're like, oh, you're operating outside of your budget, which is the millage. And I've said repeatedly, the millage isn't the cap of where we were always operating on. And that's why we asked for the amount that we did at that point in
Yeah,
time.
I understand. And like I say, I wasn't here at the time, and it really is, other than historical data, it really doesn't push us forward. And so I think in the processes moving forward, it would be nice if all departments operated within its own budget. And so,
Steve, I just want to make sure we're not mincing terms here, or confusing terms. Has the fire department ever been outside of its budget? Because millage and budget are two completely separate ideas.
Oh, yeah.
And so
No,
if
yeah,
we're outside of a
absolutely.
millage, sure, but the millage was never intended to cover the whole department. But I mean, I heard it in the board meeting too last week that we're outside of the budget. Well, I mean, I don't control the budget, chief does, but I would assume we would be getting screamed at a lot louder if we were actually outside of our budget.
I think the first year that I was on this board, I think we had to fund it by 100,000 after some mid budget year.
Okay.
And so I don't remember the specifics of it, but it was into the budget year, and it was apparent that it was going to be a shortfall. And so 100,000 sticks in my mind for some.
The exercise that we did for however many weeks we've met is really the first time this department has really gone line item by line item. I think we have only finally found out what it costs to operate this department. Am I wrong? I mean,
No,
the township has gone through budgets, but this is the very first time that we sat down as 6 individuals that are fairly intelligent and really looked at dollars and cents. And this was, I think we're only now, past is past, I don't give a crap, but we have only now figured out what does it cost to operate a fire department as it looks today.
That's true. And so
Past history doesn't matter.
yeah, and so therefore, I really don't want to waste, or not waste, I don't really want to consume a lot of time about what it looked like then versus what it should look like now.
I think my biggest point about that the rabbit hole we went down was the simple fact is, if we are not within our millage, okay, then there will have to be time and effort on somebody's part to try and figure out where those costs will, or that money will come from.
No doubt. And yeah, there is no doubt. And the township board has spent
Mhm.
hours trying to squeeze as much as we can. So keep in mind, from my point of view, when we balance the budget and just get to a place where we can't spend any other money, we can't set any over here, we can't anticipate future needs, we just simply are spending our entire paycheck on current needs. And that is a recipe for disaster. It may not happen today, it may not happen next year, but it will happen. If you just simply take a look at your own personal lives, and if you have $100 and if you spend $100, you cannot anticipate any other contingencies whatsoever. So if we don't plan for the future, then we are doomed to fail. It's really that simple. And so that's why I say every department should be able to operate on its own. If we didn't have a mechanism, for example, in the water department to anticipate future needs, whether it be infrastructural needs or any other long-term need, then somebody doesn't get water. And so if we adjust our rates properly, then we can anticipate the need for those pumps and those grinding stations and infrastructural changes and those sorts of things. As my con section had pointed out, the limitation of our physical structure. On my travels this weekend, I probably went by 8 or 9 volunteer fire departments that have just terrific physical plants that can accommodate, a truck that
Today's
would be
modern
two
equipment.
stories tall.
Right. Today's modern.
Yeah, and so we can't, as it stands right now, we simply can't. You can't dig down so that the trucks back into a cave. We can't go up because of physical structural problems. And so looking at $1 million just to accommodate a reasonable fire barn. And so we don't have a contingency fund at all. So if we needed 3 mills, I'd say go to 4. Because 3 gets you to an even plateau. And you ultimately walk into downstream exactly the same problem. And so if fail to plan to fail, as an old boss of mine once said. So
Steve,
I
I don't know if this goes under this exact one, but would, if we didn't have our own fire department, are there grants or monies from the states or anything like that that we wouldn't be eligible to work for anymore?
well, if it was a 501c3 or some nonprofit or something like that.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know which category it would go under, but if we don't have our own fire department, are there grants and things that we're no longer eligible for as a township as a whole?
I suppose it
Emergency
depends upon
preparedness
how you-
grants, things of those natures.
Yeah, there's always going to be monies available someplace. If it's a 501 non-for-profit, all kinds of money out there for that. They are unique in their characteristic in that they can go
For
out
them,
funding.
but I'm saying for the township itself.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know that we're
I don't
receiving
know
any
that we would be
grants,
able to
really.
go out.
Yeah,
for
I don't know if we're
grants.
getting any now. I just
Yeah.
didn't know if that would make us then ineligible for any.
I'm honestly not completely sure about that. So that might be something to look at, and that could be either a pro or a con. In fact, I'm going to just make a note, funding mechanisms on either side. So it's a good point. So I know that as a municipality, we would be able to seek probably federal, state funding, maybe some other rural development, I don't know. And as a 501c3 or as a contract service, I don't know the answer to that question. By the way, that should probably be something that we should put on our list of questions. All right. Did I see your hand up? Oh, I'm sorry, my peripheral vision, the glasses got in the way. All right, anything else on that page? Otherwise, I want to push forward. All right. Next one on the list was a countywide fire authority. Well, the first con would probably be that time is not on our side. Although I think it's a very interesting idea. And I think that it is likely in the future, whenever that is, that the economy of scale will put it in such a place that it makes sense to do those sorts of things. Just funding mechanisms will change. And that those sorts of things will simply necessitate municipalities to consider looking at options that they would otherwise not have looked at in the past. And I don't know, geographically speaking, how realistic it is to have a countywide fire authority. I suspect it could be done, no different than any other sort of, maybe a countywide ambulance. That seems to work fine. And so I don't know what a.
There's dozens of different models that, you know,
I'm sure
countywide
there
could
are.
choose to operate
Yeah,
under.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know of any, if there are any countywide type fire services. I don't know. I can't think of anything. So, but anyway, it's going to take a little bit longer than between now and June to handle that.
Mhm. That was my big con, time and expense to meet all obligations and execute a well thought out plan covering all possible variables.
Yeah. On the other hand, a pro
Mhm.
would be consolidation or economy of scale. Would work
That's the
beautifully.
exact pro that I got, economy of scale for county, better utilization of resources for all citizens of Alpena County.
And I think there would be a cost savings countywide.
Pro,
Yeah,
Potentially.
Yeah,
Might cost some more though, you know. Some
Well,
smaller township, I might have to pay a little bit more than they are now, but
overall,
largers would have to pay a little bit
overall,
less.
one rate for the same service, you know.
Mhm.
the other thing is, I mean,
Well,
we've got
that's-
countywide
that's the
fire
whole point of
authority. Are
Public
we
Act
talking
57.
fire? Are we talking EMS? Are we talking both?
well,
Elevate to a
I-
county issue at that point, so.
I would think that we would probably have to at least mimic the minimum expectation that the county would have relative to its contract with the city for ambulance services. So, and I believe at this particular point in time, all townships that have a fire department meet the minimum expectation. So we would have to, I don't know about those municipalities such as Wellington
They
or,
contract, they already contract.
yeah, and so
So
how,
they're meeting the minimums, you know, they're providing it, it's
Yeah.
just not their own personnel.
yeah, and I suspect that they are, in fact, I'm sure that they are paying a fee to Long Rapids and to, I believe, Green for some of those contracted services.
Yeah.
I put down it erases geopolitical lines
Pro or con?
as a, I call it pro.
What is it?
It erases geopolitical lines. It's no longer ours versus yours. It's all ours.
Eliminate the turf war.
Mhm.
There would be to me, which goes alongside what you're saying, is that there would be an operational board that would probably have liaisons from some various municipalities to sit on that board to make sure that one municipality doesn't get all the benefit where everybody else is paying for that benefit. Each township would have a vote, or each municipality would have a vote as opposed to a vote based upon population. It equalizes things a little bit.
So checks and balances.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Probably a better way to put it.
So you can fit it,
The
so you can fit it in the box.
The time frame is probably,
That's the huge one.
yeah, I mean,
That's
you're
the huge
probably
one.
10, 20 years on down the road.
Yeah, I would
Might have been
guess
able to come up
that it
with
would be
3
a
years of plan.
minimum of 3 to 4 years just to
Oh.
get the paperwork
Even-
completely all,
Even to get the intergovernmental
yeah.
entities that are remotely talking about it on an agenda.
I would be surprised if there isn't already, not about this specifically, but if there isn't already a great deal of conversation taking place amongst municipalities of what does the long-term future look like? We know that, for example, assessing, the state is sort of pushing into a certain direction, which is certainly a consolidation of efforts. And so there probably won't be 10 or 15 assessors in a county. There might be, I don't know, one. And so
One department, yeah.
we will go kicking and screaming into certain areas. And then, like is usually the case with change, we'll look back on it 2 or 3 years from now and go, "Phew, wow, why didn't we do that a whole lot sooner?" And so we all have examples of that in our own either business lives or personal lives where we fought. I used to fight the fax machine, didn't see the benefit of it. Why is it
Because you're
important?
a dinosaur.
Why is it important to have something 3 minutes sooner? Now I complain that it's
Oh, you
just
mean-
been 15 seconds. Where's my stuff?
You mean when it was first becoming into
Oh,
play?
yeah,
Oh, okay.
I never saw the benefit. And so apparently I'm not unlike those
And now you've lived
dinosaurs.
through it. Now you've lived through the
Yeah.
extinction of the facts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes, that's right. That's right. I want my 8-track player back.
Yeah, okay.
Hey, let's not live in the past now.
All right, reel to reel. All right, let's see here. I don't know how much time, honestly, we should spend on this particular one, because
It's
although
about
it's a good idea, it's premature. So let's move on to the hybrid, and Cash, if you would be so kind as to jump in here and talk to us.
So I've kind of been thinking about this and I think it could encompass a lot of different variables where maybe we would run some type of paid on call with a combination of full-time, maybe some integration, maybe or in cooperation with the city, maybe we see about them kind of, parking an ambulance in there and maybe working as we provide an EMT, they provide a paramedic, maybe something along those lines, or
I'd even open that up to any entity
any
that
entity,
can
yeah.
provide that type of service.
So, I think some of it's limited by obviously our system, the countywide system, I think, but I think you could do a lot of different options out of this, and that could change a lot of the variables, the pros and cons, costs and everything.
So is this something that we would just, as we write into these line items that can we be, you want to be generic about it or do you want to be specific about it?
Well, I think it really depends what direction you go, because, if you had, say, for instance, a full-time staff during the day and maybe we were all paid on call after hours at a certain period, that could be some type of hybrid model.
Similar to what we had talked about for early on when we were looking at
Correct.
budgetary things. So a combination paid during sort of peak hours and then volunteer during non-peak hours.
Or maybe where we, a true cooperation with another entity where maybe they provide a paramedic or, that we could supplement with some type of full-time staff. I mean, there's a lot of different options I think you could do.
I want to try to figure out how to write it down in a format. So, the pro would be,
Cost savings, I think would be
well,
fairly.
Depending on how you set it up, it could actually be a revenue stream for the township.
Mhm.
daytime crew, evening paid on call would be one.
What I have under one of the pros would be the less upfront cost to the township. If you talk about a true agency style, in my world, we're used to, when we talk about agency people and when we need personnel, we plug and play. So like, I'm a nurse, I'm gonna go be an agency nurse. I can go anywhere that is contracted. I walk in there, they're looking at me as I'm just labor. I follow their rules, I use their equipment, that, but all of my contracted benefits and everything goes under the agency.
Yeah,
So it's less upfront cost if you really look at a true agency style, that we're taking the person and we're plugging and play.
Travel firefighters. I like the idea.
Yeah.
Go
That does
summer
exist.
down in
That does
Arizona.
exist. There's a company that actually does that.
yeah, those aren't uncommon. Substitute teachers, for example. They're not employed by the school. They're
Mhm.
employed by essentially an employment
Mhm.
agency. I just wonder in the practical application, would a traveling,
And I don't necessarily mean a traveling.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm
not
just-
that we're gonna have a rotation of staff. No,
no, because that
More of a secure contract agency type person. And whether that would be a fire or whether that would be EMS, I don't know.
how would that be different than contracted?
Because we would still be providing one of our people.
Oh, okay.
They would just
Okay,
provide
okay,
one
okay.
person. We would provide the partner.
I
of
got you.
that.
I got
The
you.
actual
Okay.
jurisdiction actually still has authority over those people while they work for them. So they're,
Correct.
pretty much, they are an employee of you. They're just not your employee.
So
While
sort
they're
of-
working there.
Sort of
That makes sense.
shared operational, shared. I'm trying to figure out how to, remember, it's still early.
And I don't know how else to word it, because in
Yeah,
my brain, in my
yeah,
world, it's
yeah,
agency style provisions.
I'm understanding what you're saying, and it would essentially be we would be a general contractor, and we might need some subcontracted labor.
There you
Okay,
so-
yes.
And so those subcontracted services would be not necessarily when you need a plumber, but the plumber will be here from this time to this time, providing these types of services by way of agreement. Okay. I'm going to just make a note to myself. I'll clean this up a little differently. So if I relate that issue, then from a con standpoint, that subcontractor would only be bound by that contractual duty. And if there was something else that came up during that contractual duty, then that subcontractor would have the right to bill extra time or services outside the agreement. Okay.
Unless the agreement was actually built that way.
Yeah, I understand. I don't know how you have a contract that would be so open-ended that it says, I expect you to do A, but then, you know, if B, C, D through G come along, then that's just something that you're gonna donate to us.
Mhm.
All right, Cash, anything, any other thoughts?
So I think you could have, as a pro, could be more efficient than the way we're doing things now, depending on what model you chose. If we went with some combination of the paid on call or, but I think it could be more efficient than what we're doing now. And we still retain control ultimately.
Yeah. So basically a continued economy of scale through just coordinating services.
Better utilization. I think on a con, you could have, you know, a transition period. I don't know. Obviously, it'd take a little bit of planning, so there could be a transition period that, I don't know if we'd have enough time to do that, but that could be a con.
Say it again, please.
Like actually getting it up and running. So
Yeah,
that
okay.
period of time, the time frame.
Help me with how I would like to say this. But could a pro be the potential of, if we have, with this hybrid, if that entity, if another entity comes in and they focus on the EMS, we focus on the fire, is that a pro because it's what they do? So like, and I can only refer from my world, that you have melanoma. Do I want to go to the general practitioner because I have melanoma, or do I want to go to the dermatologist because they specialize in that and they can focus all of their time and energy on that to be the best at what they do without any dilution of having to reallocate resources over here?
Yeah,
It's almost like
it
dedicated
probably,
resources.
it
You have the
probably sounds
specialties.
like, using your analogy, that those sorts of medical services really, I mean, if we boil it down here, it means fire or EMS.
Mhm.
So if we were to live up to the mission of the township, and that is that we are providing fire services, then under a sort of a hybrid, we would effectively lease out a portion of the building to those people that would have skilled services in emergency medical responses. Is that what I'm kind of hearing you say?
I think yes.
That, or you could have two separate departments. You got a fire department and a rescue department. Rescue does all your medical calls and fire just handles fire.
So but in a normal day, if there's a medical emergency bell that goes off, don't you also roll a fire truck
Potentially.
potentially, or not always?
Potentially, we've been using the Bravos or the Tangos, so we're not putting wear and tear on the engines. Like if we end up going, like, if we're gonna be out and about doing some kind of training or inspections or something, we'll take the fire truck with us, so that way we're not rushing back to the station to get the fire truck, but the fire truck is licensed to go on medical calls.
Steve, our engines are licensed at the same level of that the ambulances are, so that
Okay.
we are allowed to.
And
to respond to
they're
it.
equipped as such?
Yes,
Okay,
they are BLS non-transport engines.
so,
So how did that work when we had our transport?
So that was the difference, was the engines can't transport. They can't have a transporting license, at least the type engines we have, which don't ever buy those that can. But so we would have BLS non-transporting on the engines and the BLS transporting on the actual ambulances.
So that's when we had.
So that's when we had to run the Bravos to an EMS call to maintain their licensure and compliance with that. If we had to field the first one out for the license, so that way if there was a second medical call, then an engine could go on it and we're still fulfilling the obligations of our license.
So it depends on structure.
Yeah,
And-
it all depends on structure and
So
like if you, like, for instance, if you had an ALS license, technically your first call you send an ALS truck to, and every other call you could send BLS trucks to. So you can have different license levels in your own department. They don't all have to be identically the same.
So thinking of this hybrid, I mean, if we chose, if MMR, just because it's the only ambulance service I know, all they are is an ambulance service. You could contract with them in a hybrid situation, providing the basic licensing requirements, and then still have a fire department responding with, because ambulances don't necessarily have the jaws of life on them, and things like that, responding to a
Correct.
car accident.
Well, and this kind of plays into the discussion we had at the last meeting where we are BLS non-transport. We're the only township in the county. The rest of them operated at MFR level. Why wouldn't we
Well, and
do
that's
the
what we-
same if we're looking to regroup?
Yeah, and so we talked about those sorts of things as a way of sort of pulling back to the basics of what we are as a township.
So a pro of a very significant hybrid would be, there would be many additional companies available to reach out to contract with.
Yeah.
That would be a pro. I mean, right
Mm-hmm.
now,
You got Mid-Michigan, you got Tri Township Ambulance, you got.
He said
Yeah, there's no
MMR.
reason
Those are
why
just.
MMR wouldn't
No, you
come
got
up here.
MMR.
if they can make money, they're coming.
Didn't MMR just Traverse City? Who was it? Somebody did something over there.
There's something going on in Trevor's and something going on down south.
But you could contract with Mid-Michigan or.
Any entity that has an ambulance theoretically. I mean, AMR is a good, they go into, or it's a good example of this because they'll go into a state that they're not in and they'll just
They're
plop
across-
down and then they'll spread out.
They're across the entire.
They're across the
country,
entire
aren't
country. So there's, Superior Ambulance, they're out of
And
Chicago, and
they would,
over in the
any
greater
of these
Detroit area.
entities would be ALS.
Hmm?
Any of these entities that we just talked about would be ALS.
I believe so. I believe they'll have, they have both. You know,
I'm sure
they
they've
can
I'm
do
sure
whatever they need.
You can contract with them and they'll
Yeah.
provide the staff that they need.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, a hybrid, and that would be right back to, the township would have many options.
Yeah,
So I would say a
so,
pro to that would be is now you have bidding competition.
so now
So
I
You're gonna lower the costs inherently because now it's not a one source bid or anything like that. You're gonna have people competing to get that contract. So it may, one might cost the township money and one might pay the township to be here depending on their models. I can't speak for them. They could be any gambit in between, but you're gonna have multiple agencies competing for that work if they would want to. I mean, that's an assumption they would want to bid on it.
So, yeah, I mean, we would want to, in any of those sorts of situations, it has been my experience that if the person requesting or the entity requesting those services don't set the parameters by which somebody would bid, then there's a great deal of ambiguity built right into anything that you do. So basically what I wrote down here is that we would effectively, we mean being the township, would effectively continue to operate a fire department with maybe medical first response and some other entity, whether it be the city or whomever, could operate an ambulance service out of our facility. Am I stating that?
Well, I don't know that we would necessarily.
Yeah, I suppose they wouldn't technically have to be out of this structure, out of these
Well, but they
buildings.
wouldn't have to necessarily be what I'm thinking is that it's you're still providing just basic, minimal, whatever our license requires.
Yeah,
So the ambulance, it would just be a contract.
yeah, and if they wanted to be in a garage somewhere down the road, so what, right?
Right.
All right, okay. Okay,
Along that lines, with talking about already established companies, that it's not a new process to them. So we would be able to reach out to these other municipalities and say, hey, how's that work? What's your contract like? As well as the other entity that, this isn't the first rodeo. They're not
Yeah.
exploring new territory.
yeah.
They may even have like models they follow that are of a national type standard
Oh,
or
I'm
something too. I mean, they figure all sorts of resources to.
Yeah, I don't imagine not too many places continue to reinvent the wheel,
Right.
if something works, it works.
It's insane to me that Alpena County has not experienced a for-profit ambulance service here.
That's
It's
all.
just-
Didn't
it's
there
the
used
Entire
to
west
be
side of the
one?
state is
Mhm.
like that, where
It's
they use
just
private
insane
ambulance
to me
companies to
that-
do all the ambulance, and then fire departments just run their own fire department, and then.
Wasn't
That's a
there at
common model
one
there.
point? Wasn't
Way
it
back.
MMR and those sorts of places? Weren't they here before?
Not in the last 20 years that I've.
No,
Oh,
my-
okay.
I'm,
I mean, you might have seen them come.
Wasn't
out
there an
for a
ambulance company down off
transfer,
South Road,
maybe.
Spruce or something?
I'm not indigenous to the area, so I do have limited knowledge, but to the best of my knowledge, going back to was it 1948, chief? Right. Correct. And
Well,
within
that-
the city limits, the city Alpena actually was, I'm gonna give you a toot here. City Alpena actually was way ahead of its time back in the 30s when the fire department started providing what was considered ambulance back then. I always get a little bit, I pull a flag out of my pocket, because I hear a lot of talk about the EMS model in California and how they did this and they did that, and God bless them, because now the rest of the country is that. Back in the 30s, the city of Alpena was providing ambulance service way before that, and it had been that way up until the 80s, I believe, is when it became a county-wide entity, and then it was 92 that it went from BLS to ALS.
Well, back in the 60s and
So-
70s, there was still a private, at least one private ambulance service. in Alpena.
Well, and it wasn't uncommon back then too for funeral homes to provide ambulance services
It's
to
just
very
amazing to
local.
me in today's world that we have not experienced.
Well, I guess it's certainly worth writing down, but of course, the con to that, and this goes to Chris's statement, is that when you open it up to competitive bidding, it wouldn't be uncommon for somebody to want to buy a contract and then 2 or 3 years into it go, hey, we need this.
Yep.
And you go, sorry, you were bound by your contract as well. We're done. And we're gonna exercise the clause of the contract for an escape clause. And so that's the risk on that one. So how do you resolve that? You have tight contracts that don't
Well,
give
any
that.
of the above,
Of
any
course.
contractual thing has that same application.
You bet. That's always going to be.
But if we want to throw economies of scale on the table, let's think about this. If we have a nationwide company that comes in, they have a lot more, or even a statewide company has a lot more resources than we do locally.
Agreed. Oh, yeah, I would absolutely agree with you. I'm just throwing out the
Mhm,
devil's
yeah.
advocate, because if we don't,
Yeah.
if we only look at
Yeah,
the
no,
sunshine and
I have that
roses
under the
and-
Contract
the
stuff.
potential contractual obligations.
Any other areas on that one, Cash or anybody else?
Well, I mean, just like I said, the county structure, how it's set up, that, you know, there could be a conflict with that if we're looking at going above and beyond, basically MFR services. Because of the way it's tiered now.
With the county?
Yeah,
That if we went beyond our duty,
so I'm just saying right now, what we're required
right?
and the way the county is entered into agreement with the city, the ALS portion we're not required to do at this point. So I guess we could be adding a benefit,
You're
a
not,
benefit.
you're not required to, but there's nothing that says the local municipality can't take control of their own jurisdiction. Like the county can't go and tell your residents what to do if you're going to tell them what to do.
Right, I'm just saying, we would be in conflict with that, is what I'm saying.
As a con then?
Well, yeah, I think that could be a political hurdle.
When is that contract?
I believe it's 2024.
5 years from right now?
Mhm.
All right, if there's nothing else on those right now, I would like to move on.
Yep.
And so let's, one of the requests of the Board of Trustees is for us to try to develop questions. And so when we met, it was determined that, and probably because Cash wasn't in the room, that we would have a committee essentially created that would bring forth questions. And I guess for all practical purposes, it would be questions for the city, excuse me, on the agreement that has been, or at least on the offer that has been made by the city on options 1, 2, and 3, which I apologize, I do not have in front of me, so my bad. I got into town later last night and just flat didn't feel like driving over to my office to grab that stuff. And so I sent out that email asking you to sort of either peruse all 3 of those agreements or to pinpoint, I guess, on one of them. So somewhere along the line, we need to establish questions, because I would have several. And I'm hoping my questions will probably be more geared to more financial kind of things as opposed to structural sorts of things, because that's sort of my wheelhouse. And so I want to try to develop as many questions as we can, because that committee would be Supervisor Skibby, Trustee Reinhardt, and the reluctant Steve Lappin. And so if we can try to come up with questions that we can ask whomever our suitors would be, and realistically right now it's the city of Alpena, because that's the only entity that has stepped forward to offer their services.
At this moment in time.
Yes, that's right. And
So-
so,
Okay, stop it for 1 second. So Bev did a wonderful job with her questions that she came up with. If I made a copy and you want to look at those,
you bet.
I think she's covered a lot
Yeah,
of the
we can save
areas.
some time.
Oh, give me a second. Anybody else need a copy?
Chad, do you need a copy of it?
No, I can take my glasses off and read.
You want me to hold it here? Or-
No, that's too far
or is
away.
that too- okay.
That's a bugger getting old.
Not for the faint at heart.
You know,
No.
it's a dual-edged sword. It really and truthfully is. I mean, I like the wisdom that comes along with it. The physical components is probably the most irritating.
I
My
offered
brain says I'm
to,
20, my back and my knees say
this
otherwise.
weekend, I offered to go down and help my daughter and her husband to basically gut their bathroom and then to reinstall sheetrock and then to install this Schluter waterproofing system. And I knocked out about 20 hours worth of work, and then not including drive times.
So when your dad was your age, was he helping you do that stuff?
Not at all.
You know, I have an amazing gift. My cousin gave me 14 years of my grandfather's journal that I just
You
started
have-
reading.
This is only my copy.
There should be 5
got it.
pages.
He said he didn't
Yeah,
want
I've
to.
got it.
And I'm reading along about all the stuff that he's doing. And then all of a sudden he's in there, oh, today is my 60th birthday. I'm like, oh my God, how did you do that then?
Bev put a lot of work into that.
Yeah, I
I think it
see
should be
that.
acknowledged that she's.
Yeah, I see that.
I've read through it a couple of different times. And she's pointed out some things.
Thank you.
Just kind of makes my list a little weak. Thank you, Bev. That's great.
Detail.
Somewhere in here, I presume, are, so one of the issues, if we look at, notwithstanding any exterior component whatsoever, if we look at the way the funding process is now, as I mentioned earlier, it was inevitable that we would be in a financial pinch for a variety of reasons. And so notwithstanding the millage is probably the single biggest Achilles heel financially. And so when I look at the offer as presented by the city to operate the fire department for, I believe the term was 8 years, if I'm not mistaken. And basically it's in conjunction with the length of the current fire department millage. And that cost would be a savings to the township of roughly 85,000-ish per year for X number of years. So then of course, I need to ask the question, what happens after that? And if how long does it take if there's incremental adjustments in an agreement, just for cost of living, et cetera? Do we find ourselves at some future date in exactly the same position that we are today because we didn't anticipate things?
Or worse.
Or
Worse.
absolutely. And so I would want to have in some sort of an agreement with whomever it would be with, that these be very long-term agreements, that not be 5 years here, 5 years there, that it be a 20-year agreement, and one that you cannot just decide to get out of. It would take you years to get out of an agreement, because there's so much planning that has to take place. So both entities would have to be in a position where they could, let's, for the sake of argument, say we've got a 15-year agreement and that the marriage just isn't working out. And we're 3 or 4 years into the agreement and we are just constantly bickering. And we say, I'm done. Then that out clause should probably be 4 or 5 years in order to get out of an agreement, because there's lots and lots of things that have to take place. Now, you could probably have a situation where we could expedite it. In this case, the township, and then you could mutually agree upon something that would end within a shorter period of time. But that goes under the assumption that both are on the same page at the same time. And so that's probably my biggest issue. Other issues I would have would be, we've just, we've basically hired a couple of people. And some have got, a few hours on the job, some got a few weeks on the job. What happened to them? Have we had somebody move into an area only to have a problem somewhere along the line? So those are that was another question that I had. And Michelle had come up with a few questions as well. And so maybe what I can do is take the stuff that I'd like to get a chance to sort of chew on this a little bit and make any little notes that I would have. Are there any other beyond that small list that Deb has come up with?
Everybody says I'm small.
Are there any other areas that are outside of this window that any of you have? If not, then we'll.
Yeah, I got a couple questions. I mean, they may have been covered because Bev does such a great job of covering all aspects of everything of life in here. But I mean, my biggest one is where did this price come up from? Like how did they arrive at that number other than, I mean, I could see, you look at what the village is and you can write a number that's a little bit less than that. I see that side of it, but because in all their terms, they said they're not increasing any staffing. They're not dedicating any units. They're just using the buildings to park their stuff in and respond in our area. So without any change in staffing or really any change to their operations, like why does that cost $400,000?
Yeah,
If you're not paying for any people.
You're asking the wrong guy.
No, I'm
just-
not asking you.
that's
That's
so,
my
yeah.
question to add to this.
One of the questions that I wonder about, and it would be along your lines of more of a detailed an understanding of how you arrived at something.
Right there.
Because I think the thing that bugs me a little bit is that we all as taxpayers are paying for the county for ALS services. And it just, in this case, the city has the contract. And it kind of seems to me that if baked into that $400,000 and some would include payroll costs and other services for ALS type services, are we in fact not being double dipped?
Mhm.
And so I think that would be a reasonable way of trying to understand how so if you've got a firefighter who happens to be a paramedic, and if the majority of our runs are ALS type runs, then I don't think we should be charged for something that they're already being paid to do. And so I just think that falls, that does as a little sour taste in my mouth. And so if 30% of our runs are fire related, then I understand it. I get it. That would be a reasonable cost. But if we're already paying for ambulance services through a millage, I don't imagine there's other municipalities that would be paid twice, have that service be paid twice. So that one's always bugged me.
Steve, I think I want to add also and throw in there, it's not only twice, but there is a potential of a third time that they're actually getting paid when they bill insurance. I do understand in the contract that they do provide for Alpena County residents the $200. But what above that, then is the insurance paying for their billing? So really, in my mind,
It's three
that's
revenue
three
sources.
resources that they're being paid for that same service.
Well, I guess if there is I guess if I look at it from a different point of view, if we have the ability to do basically the same thing, why haven't we? And if the city or whomever else has the ability to recoup some of their costs, good for them.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, in
Yeah, no,
perspective, they have at least three
Yeah, but
potential
it- but
revenue
it-
streams that for that same exact service.
Yeah, and I don't have,
Like for
personally, I don't
instance,
have an issue with
I've
somebody.
reached out to couple private ambulance companies and I'm waiting for them to give us proposals to actually send the board information. So I can't speak on their behalf, but just in talks, it sounds like with the amount of medical runs that happen just in the township, they said, well, that basically would cover an ALS ambulance price. So it would be like potentially a net neutral of, okay, you provide the building for us to park in, and we won't charge you anything to have two paramedics in here because we'll recoup our costs just doing transports. So again, where does the city arrive at $400,000 to provide that service when we're providing the vehicles, the buildings, the maintenance on the buildings, gas, power, electric? They're not increasing their personnel costs. So for no additional cost to them, minus ancillary little things, $400,000. That would be my biggest question. And the second,
450.
yeah, I know, I'm paraphrasing the number because there's different numbers on each
And it depends
three.
on which one we're talking about. Are we
Right.
talking about option one or are we talking about option three? Because option
Option
three
three
actually
is
goes up another
another
extra $25,000.
And I mean, the biggest glaring thing in me that I saw there, why is there no month to month? Why was that specifically said there will be no month to month if they're trying to help a neighbor? Because that kind of locks us in where, well, if we're trying to hire our own staff and we need something to help us, if we chose to go down that road, they pretty much said, no, we're not going to help you at all anymore, middle finger off to you. Like it's not costing them a whole bunch. I mean, if it's going to cost this much to do it for this long, why couldn't that be prorated down to this amount? I mean, unless they're front loading or back loading alone, where they're, well, it only makes sense if we get this whole amount. Like, well, that's not a great way to do business, but that's their choice. So that would be a big question for me, is if in all the other documents say they're trying to help out their neighbor, why are you specifically spelling out something that could help your neighbor? Feels kind of like a slap.
That's my bullet number 2 under option 2.
I knew you'd get somewhere. Oh, yeah. It's already written down.
All right, again, I wanna take
It's
some
not
time
going
to-
to take 5 minutes, Steve.
Yeah, I gotta take some time to look at all of this. And no doubt, these are some great questions. And so those are worthwhile. And so is there anything else that we want to discuss? So we're actually going to get out of here on time, which is wonderful. Anything?
There's a first for everything.
That's right.
So the next board meeting is,
The 23rd, I think it is.
which is this week.
Next
Next
Monday.
Yeah, it's the 23rd.
26.
I got it wrote it
26.
down somewhere. 26.
26.
So what I'll do is I probably won't figure out a way to put this into some other format. I'll probably use said format in front of me under the no sense in reinventing the wheel. And if some of my other questions or anybody else's other questions are sort of baked into this thing, then no sense in duplicating it. But, you know, my biggest question, and then other questions were specifically about Matt and Luke, what happens to them?
But also, we got chief and you know, sitting here that, I mean, we need to guarantee employment, period.
Well, the city's been pretty clear on that for a couple of reasons.
Well, the township can be very clear on things too.
Yeah, I know, I get it, I get it. I think that there are some, I think there are some two separate issues. And so I don't know if one is just a both or one or whatever, may just simply be contractual things that they are obligated by.
Well, and I think too, we have to just keep in mind that we do have a budget set for the next year, so we can make it another year. And, you know, if we want to explore other options, we have the time to do that. If we can get our staff.
Why is there this rushed deadline? This arbitrary rush deadline?
Well,
We've already
the
approved a
June-
budget on the
the
township
June
to
was-
run our own department.
Chief, did
And we're
that
already-
go through June 30 or June 1? June 30. That is the, and I think that just lines up with the union contract, doesn't it? Isn't that what isn't
Yeah.
that how we arrived at that? I think it just lines up that way. And so that's the line in the sand. And so that's, it is what it is. We can't say we don't like that date anymore. We want it to be September 23rd.
Well, we could.
Well, yeah, that's my point.
Yeah, we can say anything we want. And
It's
the
partly
other
through
parties-
our department, it's our
Yeah.
negotiating units, it's
And-
all our, it's our
Yeah,
stuff,
I
so.
mean, the city's spelled it out. And if they wanted to wiggle from there, that's their prerogative. If they don't want to wiggle from there, that's their prerogative too.
Well, when you
So
want money
here's-
from the bank, you don't get to tell them when you're gonna pay your bills and when you're gonna do this.
Yeah,
you
well,
know?
let's not confuse this stuff. And so we are in a place that our level of negotiation isn't as strong as I would like it to be. So we have varnished the floor right into the corner. And now we have to stay in the corner until the varnish is dried, or we walk across the varnish and have to redo it all again. I don't like being in a place where we're not on a level playing field. We're not. And so we are where we are.
Yeah.
This
One
committee,
source
at least
vendor,
from
that's what happens.
my vantage point, it has been my position that I would like to see the township continue to provide fire and at least MFR services. That's as far as I've taken that. So anything beyond that statement is open. And so mine isn't necessarily to save employment positions. My position is to provide services to the fire department in-house. And so that's the tact I've taken all along. So anyway, if there's nothing else for this committee, we can stand adjourned. Otherwise, I'll open it up for discussion.
So what is our next task? We've been tasked
So,
for next week's board meeting.
yep. So what I'll do is, and more than likely, I'll just forward Bev's email because it certainly looks very, very, very thorough.
I certainly do invite everyone, please,
Yes,
line
no,
by line, please.
I
read
will,
it.
I will most certainly do that. And I would ask anyone that if there are things that are in addition to that, to please
Please.
email me. And then I can consolidate that into a supplemental attachment. Otherwise, my goal will be to, excuse me, consolidate the pros and cons, put them into something that is more legible than what I've written in there now. Provide that to the Board of Trustees, and at the same time, provide those series of questions to the Board of Trustees as they have asked me.
And if anybody has stuff they want to add, can we have it done by Wednesday afternoon? Because by Thursday, we got to have the board packet together. So
Yeah,
if you're going to get that,
yeah.
What do we do?
So I'll try to today at least update this and shoot it out to all of you, at least the pros and cons. And if there's anything that I've misstated, or if there's anything that I've missed or haven't been clear enough on, please let me know, because this is important. And so, and again, if you find that there's, on your windshield time to wherever you're going, if you go, geez, I should have brought this up, well, then make a mental note and get it off to me. Because I want to be as thorough as we possibly can.
Cash, I really work best with deadlines. You said Wednesday. Can you
Yeah.
give me a time Wednesday?
well, by the close of Wednesday, so 4 o'clock.
Thank you very much.
So as an ad hoc committee, then my understanding is, because I understand I've stepped outside of the white lines a couple times as far as the ad hoc committee is concerned. The ad hoc committee is going back to the board ultimately with a recommendation.
We've
As
already
to-
done that. I don't think that the ad hoc committee's recommendation has really changed. At least I don't think so. I think we're all pretty much from our initial meeting or meetings, we sort of went down this at that point, as you may recall, the 4 options, and concluded that the best tact to take was to operate our own systems. And so I am somewhat intrigued by the hybrid, I will say, and that's interesting to me, because there could be ways to continue to live within the mission of the fire of the township, and I can't imagine an organization like MFR or whomever else you're talking about only operating within a certain geographic area. I don't know that they're set up those sorts of ways. I mean, if I were a business person, if I ran something like that, and if I could only deal with about 1/2 of the population, I probably wouldn't be interested. And so,
Let them reach out and make that decision for themselves.
yeah, absolutely.
They have
I
their
mean, I
own
guess it
models
would-
they have to
Yeah, I
follow.
mean,
They have their
I
own-
wouldn't.
I think it would also
price
depend
benefit
on
points.
that actual geographic location. I mean, we know if I'm correct or incorrect, somebody please help me. If we look at Alpena County as a whole, where is the densest population? City and town, Alpena Township, correct or incorrect?
Well, technically, population wise,
Yeah.
would be Alpena Township.
Yeah,
I believe Alpena Township has from a census standpoint, has the greater population.
oh,
And so, but it also has the largest footprint.
for
So-
geographical.
And so I'm just being pragmatic about it, is all I'm saying, is that if I look at it, I don't think, like, for example, down in Genesee and Oakland and Macomb County, it would be very easy to say,
They
I'm
lack
only
that
hanging
numbers.
out in, Macomb County. Or 3 or 4 townships within those areas, because you could be hundreds of thousands of people. And so here, they have to weigh the economic value. And so But that's somebody else's issue. I would never presume to anticipate whatever they want to do. So that's up to whomever. And just like it is with the city, if they wanted to expand their operation, I suppose they try to expand their operation. It's free enterprise, I suppose, to some extent. So if anything else,
Yeah, whether it's belaboring something or saving time, that's why I asked my question, are we making a recommendation and having, other than doing the pros and cons of each one of these, I just have three really quick and simple, why I would reject the options proposed right off the bat. And then a couple other questions about funding and we've talked about mission statement of the Township Fire Department. And I'll try to be really quick, but on the onset of the three proposals, just as an overview, and I know we already talked about this a couple minutes ago, but as Cash said, and I mentioned in a meeting the other morning, we do have a budget. The budget was approved and set. As far as I'm concerned, my timeline is, April 1st of next year. So now being encumbered by it, now we have to make a decision prior to, like late in June. I'm sorry, but we're, and I understand, that the city probably has their own time constraints and reasons and stuff, but I'm looking at trying to defend the operations of the department on two different timelines. So we either can operate till April of next year, or we can't, would be my first statement. And if we can, then I would just outwardly reject, a timeline being placed on us for a decision. My quick answer back would be is, thanks for the proposal, but the timeline doesn't meet our parameters. I was also concerned about the statement that, I'm looking forward to getting on my sailboat and saxophone and medicinal marijuana and retiring, but my paid on calls will have to go through a rehiring, or would possibly have to go through a rehiring process. And the other thing, and that brings to the whole, is it's my concern about countywide funding for ALS EMS services. And again, I already see some counter arguments to that's just the way the department is structured. But it was indicated to me by the township board that it's not palatable at all, and wasn't palatable that township residents were paying their hard-earned tax dollars in to support our for-profit non-emergency transport service. The simple fact is, the two things that stuck in my mind is that left a bad taste in my mouth. One, for me, it gave the implication that as the fire department, we were somehow trying to, swindle tax dollars to put money in our own pocket, when in fact, every penny that was earned from that non-transport service went back into the township general fund. So whether it was losing money, breaking even, or making money, that all went back into there. To get to the point, my question is then, is it palatable for the residents of Alpena Township and of a decision of the board to, and I'm going to say this on a technicality, are we willing to take a tax base funded by the entire county, meaning everybody in every township in this county pays into this ambulance fund, and use that as a crutch to take over fire operations for the township.
Take over what operation?
Fire operations for the township. If we were to, do you see what I'm saying? I mean, you live in Long Rapids, you live in Maple Ridge, you live in Sanborn, you're paying into the, into the EMS millage to provide ALS outward into the county. I think you should factor that into the fact that I don't see doing the math on scratch paper, how you're going to avoid, or how you can avoid taking that tax base from those other townships and somehow rolling that into covering the operations of running this township department if we close it down and give it over to the city. That's my big question.
I'm trying to understand what you're saying. It's
Okay, let me do this and I'll, time for rebuttal. I was born and raised in Coldwater, Michigan. And I often use that as a comparable to Alpena because the county areas are identical. Up until 1988, the populations were identical. Well, I'll give you just, and I'm kind of rounding up a little bit, but the city of Alpena is approximately 9 to 10 square miles, 10,000 people. City of Coldwater was 15 square miles, 10 to 11,000 people. For time in memoriam, their fire department has only fielded 3 4-man shifts. And that's because the simple answer to that was, why is Alpena so much larger? Well, because it's contracted with the county and subsidized by the county to provide ALS EMS services to the entire county. Otherwise, we would be looking at the city of Alpena Fire Department. You'd see a much smaller department where you'd only have like 12 full-time people, 4-man shifts, given that comparatively. And my point being is that the reason the city fire department is large enough to be able to consider taking our operations over is because it's subsidized by county EMS dollars. And to the people out in the county that are paying those EMS dollars necessarily want to give those EMS dollars so that we can let city prop up the township fire department. And my argument to that too was when I was getting back to is I want you guys to realize that I have, as a career paramedic firefighter, I'm very pro ALS. I mean, please. My problem, what I want you to temper that with is number one, what good is promising 2 firefighter paramedics in our station if they're not dedicated to our station? In other words, township service is going to be improved upon. We only had 1 firefighter EMT at each station. Well, now we see the advent of having 2 firefighter paramedics. The huge difference is that our EMT firefighter was dedicated to Alpena Township. I don't see that happening in any of these proposals. I understand why, but you're just not, I mean, the chances, my estimation is the chances of either one of these stations being empty anytime during the day is going to increase 3-fold, because our trucks no longer are going to be dedicated to Alpena Township. It's going to be closest, something pops in Presque, something pops in Long Rapids, Maple Ridge. If the South gets inundated with calls, it wouldn't be unreasonable to assume that, our unit's going to be pulled and sent into the city and stuff. So that's what I mean when I say, dedicated units. So, but more to the point is what I was trying to say is we would be looking at a 12-man department taking us over, which they couldn't were it not for the EMS subsidy, correct?
Right.
So now instead of 12, they could, I'm just rounding it up, 24, where 12 of those positions are funded by city millage tax dollars, the other 12 being funded by the county EMS. So if it's not palatable for I mean, does that door swing both ways? Is the township willing to say in good conscience, yeah, we're gonna get rid of or stand down our fire department. We're gonna keep the physical apparatus and buildings. We're gonna allow the city to man it, but you're doing that on the backs of the entire county, not just the city and the township.
I guess that sort of goes to my original question of that sort of paying for it in my taxes, and then sort of paying for it again by contracted services. So you've just elaborated a little bit further on what basically was one of my concerns. All right, thank you very much. Anything else? If not, this meeting will be